Kalis stood barefoot on the deck of the Cromara and tried to remember when the sea had last been quiet. Far off, beyond the pearly horizon, a bruised roll of clouds boiled upward like a fist. Thunder throbbed inside it, the dull heartbeat of a giant. Even in the weak afternoon light, the storm clenched the world so tightly that all colors seemed to drain into it. The sea grey, the sky a dusty parchment. Kalis himself reduced to charcoal outline, every direction tasted of metal and salt. Only the ship under his feet still shimmered, the one living gemstone left in a kingdom of slate. The Cromara was born of sky glass, a crystal rumored to be coaxed rather than quarried. Its hull, masts, and fluted spars were translucent, streaked with subtle rainbow veins. Sunlight entered the vessel, ricocheted along crystalline corridors, and emerged as suspended spectrums that licked rigging and rail. Once, dozens of ships like this had patrolled the Tempest verge under the hands of Prism sailors, drawing fury from the weather and feeding peace back to the ocean. Once, Kalis reminded himself. Now the order was a ruined mosaic, and he its lone surviving shard. He adjusted the prismatic tiller, and the ship's keel sang a scale so pure the air rang silver. He felt the pitch of it inside his bone. The storm ahead answered with a growl. Between those two notes hung the destiny of whatever islands still dared bob on this latitude. Kalis slipped a sliver of quartz from his pocket, a keepsake the size of a fingernail, all that remained of his sister's own crystal sloop, and closed his fist around it. "I know," he whispered, as though she could still hear. "We'll do better this time." Footsteps scurried behind him. Mirelle, the ship's uninvited but no longer unwelcome stowaway, clambered from below. Salt-speckled hair whipped her cheeks. She tied it with a bit of storm brew ribbon she'd salvaged from the last port. In her hands were 2 tin cups that steamed. "Kelp tea," she said, even though Kalis had tasted it only once and hadn't minded. She planted herself on the starboard rail, legs dangling, pale calves knotted with small scars, proof she'd spent more afternoons climbing razor cliff faces than sewing samplers like the girls she claimed to hate. He accepted the cup, sipped, and shuddered at the grassy bitterness. "Not bad," he lied. "Don't patronize me." Her grin flashed mischief. "I know it's vile, but it helps the throat. We'll both need ours soon." Kalis raised a brow. "Planning on singing?" She shrugged. Who knows what a storm that big will demand? He considered her quietly. She spoke like someone half guessing and half remembering, as though ancient sea lore occasionally rose in her blood like a tide she couldn't repress. During their last encounter with a squall, Mirelle had hummed an aimless tune while coiling rope. The wind's rage had slackened, as if curious. Kalis pretended to chalk it up to coincidence, but the Cromara's hull had responded too, emitting a chord that rasped against hers until both notes found harmony and settled. Since then, he'd watched her out of the corner of his eye, questioning the line between stowaway and fellow sailor, between child and catalyst. She drank, winced, then pointed past his shoulder. "That's it, isn't it? The Void Maelstrom?" A wandering scholar on the Isle of Bells had coined the name 10 days ago, before the clouds swallowed the isle entirely and left only a bruise on navigators' charts. Reports said lightning in that storm didn't flash. It bled, dripping in vertical sheets that fused sand into black glass. Whole pod schools of leviathans had beached themselves rather than linger under it. Kalis' own spyglass confirmed no ordinary gale. Its clouds weren't shaped by wind, but by emptiness, as though something massive rotated inside, shearing moisture and sky into ribbons. And still the vortex expanded. He inclined his head. "That's her. Biggest I've seen." "Bigger than the Black Wave?" she asked softly. A shard of memory pierced him. The night the horizon became one towering wall of pitch and shattered sapphire. the shriek of crystal hulls splitting like eggshell, his sister's ship lifting, tumbling end over end before detonating into shards that rained across the sea like bright hail. The black wave had devoured 20 Prism sailors, leaving Kylus and the Chromera alone amid the wreckage. He rarely spoke of it. "Maybe," he answered, "but we're stronger than we were then." Mirelle searched his face. Whatever she saw convinced her to nod. "All right, Captain, tell me what to do." "Begin by priming the chroma coils. We'll need full spectrum refraction." He glanced upward. The sun fought to wedge a few lances of light beneath the cloud deck. "Capture whatever daylight we can." Mirelle dashed off, her bare feet clicking against resonant crystal planks. Kylus watched her descend through a hatch lit by rainbow lamplight. He centered himself at the helm. Breath in, breath out. Let the color enter. He imagined the helmsman who trained him, a man named Oro, whose eyes always leaked prismatic tears when he steered. Remember, Oro had told him, colors are not ornaments, they are bones of the universe. Place them correctly, and existence stands straight. Misplace them, and even creation hunches like a cripple. The chromera collected brightness as a lung collects air, funneling it through optical arteries to the central prism core just aft of the mast. Kylus felt the ship filling. The keel's hum deepened from silver to gold to ruby, each octave thicker than the last. He tapped the deck twice with his heel. The row of facet sails unfurled, limp as silk at first, then stiffening into flat, translucent wings. Even before wind touched them, they caught radiance and scattered ripples of dye across the gunwales. Mirelle re-emerged, hair now bound with cords of amber wire that crackled faintly. "Coils are saturated," she said, cheeks flushed from the ship's internal heat. "Ready to pivot on your mark." Kylus nodded approval. "Anchor lines free?" "Aye." "Then let's paint ourselves a storm." He threw the helm hard to port, and the chromara leaned into the decision. Crystals flexed, redistributing stress across refractive spines. The ship accelerated. Water hissed under the keel. The prow cleaved swells like a blade carved of sunrise. Ahead, the void maelstrom churned, so vast now it blotted 3/4 of the sky. Its rim glittered with stolen lightning. The eye at its center was not calm, but chaos subdued. A cauldron where wind circled so quickly it forgot how to move forward. As they breached the storm's outer wall, day vanished. Night swallowed them, yet not normal night. This darkness had texture, oily, granular. Droplets slapped the deck, sizzling, turning to vapor that smelled like burnt iron. The chromara's native glow fought back, staining gloom with plumes of emerald and topaz. Somewhere overhead, thunder cracked open a seam, and something shrieked through it, a noise like fabric torn underwater. "Helm to starboard 3, Kylus roared. "We must circle with the wind before splitting it." Marilla dashed to the auxiliary spokes, helping him wrestle the wheel. The ship reoriented, bow now matching the rotation of the gale. They sped along the inner wall, surfing a river of horizontal rain. Centrifugal force pinned their stomachs to their spines. Colors from the crystal hulls spun outward, trailing after-images that smeared like wet paint across the vapor. For a heartbeat, those smeared colors slowed the local wind. Where red bled, heat blossomed. Where blue dripped, droplets froze mid-air and shattered into snow. Kylus recognized the pattern. Yes, even this storm, however unnatural, obeyed the grammar of refraction. They had a chance. Time to speak that grammar aloud. He depressed a lever near the wheel. The central prism core rose from the deck like a blooming flower of angled glass petals. Each facet contained swirling, mist-captured sunlight, sorted into spectra. The petals rotated until a narrow beam knifed upward. Kylus raised his left hand into it. The light split across his fingers, exploding into 7 distinct rays, one for each lineage of prism sailor. Red courage, orange devotion, yellow wit, Green patience, blue faith, indigo sorrow, violet joy. He traced sigils in mid-air, each gesture weaving a luminous ribbon that curled around the ship. The storm snarled each time a color touched it, as though tasting something that scalded its tongue. "Ready the dorsal array!" Kalis shouted. "When I say burst, pull every pulley." Morel scrambled up the rigging. The dorsal array comprised 9 fin-like spars, each embedded with slivers of planar crystal. She cinched ropes, set clamps. Gusts tried to fling her out over the void. She countered with nimble leaps honed by those cliff faces ashore. Watching her, Kalis felt twin pangs of concern and pride, emotions he once reserved for a sister whose memory shimmered still in the quartz sliver against his chest. Lightning spidered across the cloud belly above them, bathing the Chromara in strobing images. Under those flashes he saw shapes inside the storm, silhouettes of things with too many joints, limbs folded like knotted rope. They weren't beasts. They were absences, cutouts where nothing lived, nothing breathed. Every time lightning illuminated one, the ship's hull dimmed, as though color itself recoiled. Morel reached the array and threw him a thumb up. He widened his stance and drew all 7 ribbons together, twisting them into a single cord. He felt each pigment clamp around the next, heat of courage, pulse of devotion, crackle of wit, hush of patience, hush of faith, a quieter hush, deeper, ache of sorrow, spark of joy. Then he whipped the cord outward. Morel jerked the pulleys. The dorsal fins flared open, sudden and violent like a starfish exposing its underside. Light from Kailas's ribbon surged into those fins, fractured, multiplied, ricocheted. In an instant, the Chromara ceased to be a ship and became instead the nucleus of a kaleidoscope titanic enough to reimagine the sky. Rays geysered from the fins in a ring, each beam vibrating at slightly different phase, so that colliding with the others created moiry waves of hue no mortal word had ever named. The void maelstrom wailed, its clouds convulsed as if in seizure, their charcoal layers peeling away to reveal paler, frightened understrata. The Chromara powered deeper, cutting a spiral path, each new beam shearing another layer until the storm wall was a mildew of color and vacancy, and still the core refused to unravel. A blow slammed the ship broadside, no wind, no wave, but a pressure cold as void. Kailas lurched. The helm spun free. The central prism flickered. Along the foredeck, facets cracked. Fragments rained down like shards of moon. One void silhouette had broken free of the storm and now stood upon the water, a biped formed of crackling absence. Every inch of it sucked color the way a dying star lures light. Morel slid down a halyard, landing near Kalis. The void thing strode toward them, each footstep turning foam to black sand. "Captain," she breathed, "that's not weather." He tasted copper at the back of his tongue. "It is the grief inside the weather, the part nobody wanted to face." Lightning flashed again, and in that glare Kalis saw the void thing's center, a single orb swirling with echoes of shattered ships, screams, unmoored memory. If storms were born from conflict between sea and sky, then this creature was the bruise the conflict left behind. His sister's face floated inside the orb, not her real face, an echo. Her lips framed the accusation he'd never outrun. "You abandoned me." Kailas's knees nearly folded. The quartz sliver in his pocket burned. Morel seized his wrist. "Look at me, not at it. That thing thrives on what we fear." He forced his gaze onto her. She trembled but did not flinch. "I can hold the beams," she said, voice raw. "I think they'll listen to me." "They're already listening to you," he realized. Every syllable from her throat left a faint tracer of lilac light. She was more than a stowaway. She was a living resonator. Her bloodline may be older than the Prism Order itself. The ship had chosen her long before either of them admitted it. The void thing opened a mouthless maw. Wind screamed through, Sails snapped, struts groaned. "You trust me?" Mirelle demanded. "With my soul? Then hold the helm, no matter what." She sprinted toward the fore, leapt atop the raised base of the central prism. A void gust hurled knives of sleet. She braced against it, palms pressed to crystal petals. Then she sang. The note started low, so low Kylus felt it in his sternum more than in his ears. The pitch rose, wrapped itself around the shattered textures of the storm, found cracks and slid inside. Her melody wasn't pretty. It was truthful. It carried hunger, loneliness, furious hope. As it climbed, the Cromara brightened until Kylus had to squint. The ship's fractured facets self-mended, glass knitting beneath molten color. The void thing staggered, limbs flickering. Its mouthless howl warbled off-key, clashing with Myel's song. Around them, the storm wall shuddered. Already peeled layers lost coherence and sloughed away in curtains of rain that hit the sea harmlessly, tinged a gentle rose. In his grip, the helm bucked like a beast, anxious to join her, but Kylus anchored it, steady. He fed small corrections through the keel, shaping the ship's circular path into a tightening spiral that herded the remaining mass of blackness inward. Each notch of the wheel corresponded to a subtle tonal glide in Myral's voice. He could feel them weaving a duet, her to dismantle the storm, him to guide its unraveling into safe channels. Ribbons of light converged over the void thing, forming a cage of intersecting spectrums. It lunged, but every stride met a lattice that turned its own darkness backward. The orb in its chest dimmed. Among the ghostly faces swirling there, his sister's gaze lifted. She did not smile, yet neither did she accuse. The outline of her cheek became translucent, then gone. The creature collapsed inward, shriveling to a speck the size of a peppercorn, then winked out. The silence afterward felt so sudden, Kylus heard only the creak of rigging and his own blood. Mirelle's final note tapered to nothing, quivering at the edge of audibility before dissolving like dew under dawn, and dawn indeed arrived. A hole opened in the ceiling of cloud, spilling gold across the deck. The remains of the storm, colourful streamers of vapour drifted outward, lazy, celebratory. Drops from them splattered the sea in turquoise, marigold, lavender, each drop becoming a ring of gentle ripples where seagulls swooped in delight. Mirelle sagged to her knees. Kylus rushed, caught her before she fell. Her pulse thrummed, fast but steady. When she looked up, her irises were miniature rainbows. "Did we?" she murmured. He smiled, tears tracking down his soot and salt-crusted cheeks. "We did." She peered over his shoulder at the horizon, where shards of the old storm, newly bright, arched into semicircular fans. "Look," she said, voice cracked raw. "The sea wears bracelets." Indeed, the once grey water now glimmered with concentric bands, scarlet, amber, jade, all rotating gently away from the storm's former core. Fish leapt through them, acquiring iridescent scales that flashed, then faded as they splashed back. It was a spectacle meant for poets, yet no poem could pin it. Kylus helped her stand. On impulse, he pulled the quartz sliver from his pocket and held it up. Instead of sharp grief, it now caught the sun and scattered warm glints like humour across his palm. He kissed it once, then fitted it into a groove along the main rail where a shard was missing. The shard fused seamlessly, as though it had waited years to return home. Mirelle watched, understanding blooming in her tired smile. "We're not just fixing the sea, are we? We're fixing ourselves." "Maybe they're the same thing." Kylus glanced about the horizons. Soft winds played the rigging like a harp. "But one thing is certain, I'm no longer the last Prism sailor," she snorted. "I never asked to be the next." "No," he agreed. "The calling usually chooses first and asks after." He gestured toward the helm. "Want a lesson?" Mirelle's eyebrows shot up. "Now? Shouldn't we rest?" "The sea never rests." He spread his arms, indicating the glassy calm, the prismatic afterglow. the distant archipelagos that might even now be raising flags of wonder. But she dreams. Let's steer her dreams somewhere hopeful. Mirelle squared her shoulders, marched to the helm, and set her hands upon the crystal grips. Kalis covered her fingers with his. Together they felt the subtle tug of currents, the hush of newborn breezes. The Cromara hummed like a throat clearing before song. "Where to, Captain?" she asked. He scanned the horizon, alive with possibility. "Where the next storm waits, but this time we'll find it before grief grows legs." Mirelle chuckled, then lifted her face to the widening blue. Then onward. He stepped back, letting her claim the wheel. The Cromara pivoted gracefully, prismatic sails billowing, refracting sunlight into banners of promise that trailed behind them across the soot-washed sea. Somewhere ahead, new clouds brewed. They would be ready. The ocean spread out like a blank page, the ship's keel already inscribing lines of colour upon it. And as those lines multiplied, Kalis understood at last that the saga of the Prism sailor was not a tale of one man steering a crystal ship. It was a story of every hand brave enough to hold light against darkness and dare to rearrange the sky.